Sometimes the people who leave us don't disappear completely. Sometimes they stay behind in the silence. In the empty chair across the dinner table. In the unopened text message. In the way someone checks their phone one last time before going to sleep, even after months of pretending they've moved on. And sometimes, the deepest heartbreak doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from absence. From the slow realization that someone you trusted stopped showing up emotionally long before they physically walked away. Tonight's story is about a man who built a billion-dollar empire but failed the people who loved him most. And a woman who quietly carried the weight of that failure while raising a child he never knew existed. But years later, one unexpected reunion would force both of them to confront the painful truth about love, abandonment, forgiveness, and the kind of absence that changes a child forever. Have you ever loved someone who slowly became emotionally unavailable? Have you ever waited for a call, an apology, or even simple acknowledgement from someone who once meant everything to you? Then this story will stay with you. Because sometimes, success can make a person powerful in public and completely absent in private. And what happens when the person you pushed away becomes the very person your child needs most? Stay with me until the end. Because this story isn't just about romance. It's about emotional responsibility. It's about parenthood. It's about pride, regret, healing, and the painful cost of being present too late. And before we begin, welcome to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, a place where stories don't just entertain, they leave you with something meaningful to carry into your own life. Now, let's begin. Rain hit the windows of Ethan Cole's penthouse in slow, uneven patterns, soft enough to sound peaceful if someone didn't know better. But Ethan had learned years ago that silence could lie. At 38, he owned hotels in 5 states, appeared on magazine covers he never read, and had enough money to solve almost every problem people imagined wealth could fix. Yet none of it changed the fact that every night, his 12-bedroom penthouse felt strangely unfinished, not empty. Worse, unlived in. The city stretched beneath him in glittering gold and white, but Ethan barely looked at it anymore. Somewhere along the way, success had stopped feeling like achievement and started feeling like maintenance. Another meeting, another acquisition, another late night pretending exhaustion was ambition. His phone buzzed again across the marble kitchen counter. 3 missed calls from his assistant, 1 voicemail from his lawyer, 6 unread emails marked urgent, and 1 unread text message from his younger sister. "You forgot Dad's memorial dinner again." Ethan stared at the message longer than he should have. Then he locked the phone without replying. Across the room, the television played quietly to nobody. Financial analysts discussed his newest business expansion, while his face appeared on screen beside headlines calling him disciplined, visionary, unstoppable. Ethan muted it immediately. He hated hearing strangers describe his life like they understood it. A knock sounded at the penthouse door. "Come in," he called distractedly. Mrs. Green entered carrying folded laundry. She had worked for the Cole family for almost 20 years, and was one of the few people in Ethan's life who spoke to him like a human being instead of a business opportunity. "You're still awake? It's only 11. It's Thursday night. That means nothing to me anymore." "That's the problem." Ethan gave a tired smile but said nothing. Mrs. Green set the laundry down carefully before studying him with familiar disappointment. "You missed dinner again." "I was working." "You're always working. That's generally how billion-dollar companies operate. And how long do you plan on hiding inside that excuse?" There it was. The reason most people avoided honesty around wealthy men. Honest answers made them uncomfortable. Ethan walked toward the window slowly. "I'm not hiding." Mrs. Green folded her arms. "You haven't had a real conversation with another human being in months, unless they worked for you. That's dramatic. You forgot your father's memorial." That one landed. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. His father had been dead 3 years now, but grief had settled strangely inside the family. His sister talked openly about it. His mother cried openly about it. Ethan worked. That was his version of mourning. Mrs. Green softened her voice. "Being successful doesn't mean disappearing emotionally from the people who love you." The words lingered heavily after she left. Emotionally disappearing. Ethan poured himself coffee, even though he didn't need more caffeine. The truth was, he didn't know how to stop anymore. As a child, he had learned quickly that love inside the Cole household was conditional. Achievement mattered. Weakness didn't. His father respected discipline, not emotions. So Ethan became disciplined. Perfect grades, perfect schools, perfect career, and eventually, perfectly alone. His gaze drifted toward the old photograph sitting near the bookshelf. He rarely allowed himself to look at it for long. A younger version of himself stood beside a woman with curly dark hair and bright eyes full of life. They looked sunburned and happy, standing near a food truck on Coney Island. Maya Bennett. Even now, after 7 years apart, something inside him still reacted to her name. Not dramatically, quietly, like an old bruise that never healed correctly. He remembered the last thing she ever said to him. You know what hurts the most, Ethan? You don't even realize when you're abandoning people emotionally. At the time, he had called her unfair. Now he wondered if she had simply been right. Back then, Ethan believed absence only counted if someone physically left. He didn't understand that people could feel abandoned while sitting right beside you, especially by someone who stopped noticing them. The next morning began the way most mornings did. Emails, meetings, conference calls, controlled chaos. By noon, Ethan sat inside a luxury hotel conference room while executives argued over renovation budgets. He heard every word, and none of it, because his attention kept drifting toward the rain outside, toward memory, toward Maya. He hadn't seen her in 7 years. Not since the night she packed 2 suitcases and quietly walked out of their apartment while he answered work emails during an argument. The terrifying part? He remembered the email more clearly than the fight. That realization haunted him more with age. Mr. Cole? Ethan blinked back to the present. One of the executives was staring expectantly. Sorry, Ethan said calmly. Continue. But his focus never fully returned. By evening, exhaustion settled behind his eyes like pressure. His driver pulled up outside the penthouse just after 7. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan decided not to go upstairs immediately. Instead, he walked. New York moved around him in restless energy. Street vendors shouted over traffic. Couples hurried through crosswalks holding umbrellas together. Laughter spilled from restaurants glowing warm against the cold evening rain. Normal life, messy life, connected life. Things money couldn't manufacture. Ethan stopped outside a small bookstore cafe tucked between buildings. The place looked familiar somehow. Warm yellow lights, fogged windows, crowded shelves. Without fully understanding why, he stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Coffee, old books, rain-soaked jackets. And suddenly memory wrapped around him so fast it almost hurt. Maya used to love places like this. She said bookstores made loneliness quieter. Ethan stood still near the entrance longer than necessary. Then he saw her. At first, he thought exhaustion was playing tricks on him. A woman stood near the back shelf, helping a little girl zip her coat. Curly dark hair, soft brown skin, calm movements. Older now, but unmistakably her. Maya. His heartbeat stumbled once, hard enough to feel physical. The little girl beside her couldn't have been older than 6. She laughed at something Maya whispered before running toward the counter. Ethan couldn't move. 7 years disappeared in seconds. Maya looked up and froze. The expression on her face wasn't anger. That would have been easier. It was shock mixed with something sadder, like seeing a ghost tied to old pain. Neither spoke at first. Rain tapped softly against the cafe windows while distant jazz played overhead. Finally, Maya recovered enough to straighten slightly. Ethan, her voice still sounded the same. Warm, gentle, dangerous to his self-control. Hi, he managed quietly. The little girl returned, holding hot chocolate. Mummy, can we? She stopped when she noticed Ethan. Maya's hand instinctively rested against the child's shoulder. Protective. The movement stirred something strange inside him. Ethan looked between them carefully. The girl had Maya's eyes, but something about her smile. No, his chest tightened unexpectedly. Impossible. Maya spoke before silence became unbearable. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. A faint, almost smile touched her lips. I live here. Normal people go outside sometimes. There it was. The version of herself that used humor to soften tension. He remembered loving that about her. The little girl looked curiously between them. Mummy. Who's that? Maya hesitated. Just briefly, but Ethan noticed. This is an old friend. Old friend. The phrase shouldn't have hurt. But it did. Because once upon a time, Ethan had been far more than that. The little girl offered Ethan a polite smile. Hi, hi. Something in his voice came out softer than intended. Maya adjusted the girl's backpack. We should go. Ethan nodded automatically, though disappointment hit faster than expected. After 7 years, this was it. 30 awkward seconds inside a bookstore cafe. But before Maya turned away completely, the little girl looked back at Ethan one more time, and smiled again. That was when Ethan felt it, fully. The unsettling familiarity, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. The impossible thought returning louder this time. And suddenly, for the first time in years, Ethan's carefully controlled world no longer felt stable. Ethan barely slept that night. Not because of work. Not because of the market reports waiting on his desk by morning. Not because another hotel acquisition was scheduled for final approval at 9 o'clock sharp. None of it mattered once Maya Bennett walked back into his life, carrying a little girl with familiar eyes. He lay awake staring at the ceiling while rain continued tapping softly against the penthouse windows. His mind replayed every detail from the bookstore cafe. The hesitation in Maya's voice, the guarded look in her eyes, The way her hand instinctively moved protectively toward the little girl. And the child herself. Her smile. God, it looked painfully familiar. Ethan sat up suddenly around 3 in the morning and rubbed both hands across his face. You're imagining things, he muttered to himself. But deep down, something unsettled had already begun waking inside him. Memory, regret, possibility, dangerous things. Across the city, Maya Bennett sat at her small kitchen table long after her daughter had fallen asleep. Unlike Ethan's penthouse, Maya's apartment actually looked lived in. Books stacked unevenly near the couch, crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, a half-finished science project spread across the dining table, laundry waiting patiently in a basket nearby. Real life left fingerprints everywhere here, and tonight, anxiety sat among them. Maya stared into untouched tea growing cold between her hands. She always knew this day might come. New York was too small for unfinished history. Still, she hadn't expected it to happen like that. Not in a bookstore. Not with Ava standing right there. Not after spending 7 years teaching herself how not to need Ethan Cole anymore. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. Her best friend, Nina. Maya answered quietly. Hey, you sound stressed. That obvious? You only answer on the second ring when something's wrong. Maya leaned back slowly. I saw Ethan tonight. Silence. Then, oh, yeah, at least tell me he aged badly. Despite herself, Maya laughed softly. No. Unfortunately, wealth continues to agree with him. That's rude of him. The small humor helped briefly, then reality returned. Nina's voice gentled. Did he see Ava? Maya closed her eyes. Yes. And? He noticed something. Of course he did. Maya pressed fingers against her forehead. I always knew this could happen eventually. But not before you were ready. No, Maya admitted quietly. Definitely not before I was ready. The truth was complicated. 7 years earlier, Maya hadn't left Ethan because she stopped loving him. She left because loving someone emotionally unavailable felt like slowly disappearing beside them. At first, she excused it. He's stressed. He's building his company. Things will calm down soon. But success only made Ethan more distant, more absent. Not physically at first, emotionally. He missed conversations while sitting beside her, forgot promises while answering emails, listened without hearing, touched without noticing. And the lonelier Maya became, the harder Ethan worked. A terrible cycle neither of them understood in time. Then came the pregnancy. Maya had planned to tell him during a dinner reservation he forgot twice. After the second cancellation, something inside her quietly broke. Not dramatically. That was the painful part. The relationship didn't explode. It slowly starved. By the time she finally left, Ethan seemed more confused than heartbroken. As if he genuinely didn't understand what had happened, and maybe he didn't. Maya eventually decided not to tell him about the baby. Not out of revenge, out of fear. Because if Ethan could emotionally neglect the woman he loved, what kind of father would he become? Now, 7 years later, she no longer fully trusted that decision herself. Nina spoke carefully. Do you think you'll tell him? Maya looked toward Ava's bedroom door. I don't know. And that was the most honest answer she had. The next morning, Ethan cancelled 3 meetings. His assistant nearly thought he was dying. You're rescheduling the investor lunch? Yes. And the Chicago call? Yes. You never reschedule important meetings. Ethan grabbed his coat. Today, I am. She blinked in confusion as he walked past. For years, Ethan structured his life around control. But today control felt impossible. Because one question kept destroying every attempt at rational thought. What if that child is mine? By noon, Ethan found himself standing outside the bookstore cafe again. Ridiculous. He knew that. Successful billionaires did not wander around hoping to accidentally see women from their past. Yet, here he was. The cafe owner recognized him immediately from television and nearly dropped a tray. Ethan forced polite conversation before casually asking, the woman, who was here yesterday with the little girl. Does she come often? The owner smiled. Maya? Almost every Thursday. His chest tightened hearing her name spoken naturally. Like she belonged somewhere. Like life had continued without him. Do you know her well? She teaches art classes nearby. Sweetest person you'll ever meet. Art classes. Ethan remembered Maya once wanting to open a community art studio for children. Back then, he had encouraged her distractedly while typing emails beside her. He never asked later if she still dreamed about it. The realization stung now. How many important things had he failed to notice simply because he assumed there would always be more time? Outside, Ethan sat inside his parked car longer than necessary. Then, he did something he hadn't done in years. He searched Maya online. No scandals, no dramatic history, very little social media. But eventually, he found the Community Arts Center website, and there she was. smiling beside a group of children covered in paint. Maya Bennett, youth arts coordinator. The photograph hit him unexpectedly hard. She looked happy, not perfect, not wealthy, but genuinely alive in a way Ethan hadn't felt in years. His eyes drifted lower until he saw another photo. Maya, kneeling beside the little girl from yesterday. Ava Bennett, age 6. Ethan's stomach dropped. 6. The timing aligned too perfectly. Suddenly breathing felt strangely difficult. Later that evening, Maya arrived at Ava's school auditorium for parent night. The room buzzed with exhausted adults balancing coffee cups and backpacks, while children ran loudly between chairs. Normal chaos. Maya loved it. Life wasn't polished here. It was human. She spotted Ava coloring near the front row and smiled softly. Then the smile vanished, because Ethan stood near the back entrance, tall, still, wildly out of place among folding chairs and exhausted parents. Maya's pulse stumbled instantly. What is he doing here? Their eyes met across the crowded room. Ethan walked toward her carefully, almost cautiously, like someone approaching a frightened animal. You followed me? No. That pause says otherwise. I found the school website. Maya exhaled sharply. Ethan. Is she mine? There it was. No preparation, no softening, just the terrifying question standing naked between them. Maya looked away first, and that alone answered him. Ethan felt the floor shift beneath him, emotionally. Oh my God. His voice barely existed. Maya lowered hers immediately. Keep your voice down. She's my daughter? She's 6, Ethan. That's not what I asked. Pain flickered across Maya's face. Yes, the word hit harder than he expected. Not because he doubted it, because somewhere deep down, he already knew. Ethan looked toward Ava instinctively. His daughter, his child. A little girl who loved hot chocolate and smiled like him and existed for 6 years without him knowing. Emotion rose too fast inside his chest. Shock, anger, grief, wonder, and beneath all of it, guilt. Crushing guilt. You never told me. Maya crossed her arms tightly, protecting herself now. You were never home, Ethan. That doesn't justify this. No, she said quietly. But it explains it. The old hurt returned instantly between them. Not loud, heavy. Ethan struggled to process everything at once. You let me live 6 years without knowing I had a daughter. And you spent years making me feel emotionally invisible while sitting beside me every night. The words landed with brutal precision, because they were true. Neither spoke for several seconds. Children laughed nearby, while chairs scraped loudly across the floor. Ordinary life continuing around extraordinary pain. Ethan finally asked the question haunting him most. Does she know about me? Maya hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than anything else so far. She knows her father wasn't ready to be a parent. Ethan flinched visibly, not because she yelled, because she didn't. Maya's calmness carried years of buried loneliness underneath it. And for the first time in his life, Ethan truly began understanding the damage emotional absence could create. Not dramatic damage, quiet damage. The kind that grows slowly inside people, until one day, they no longer recognize themselves. If this story is already touching your heart, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson. Because stories like this remind us that sometimes the deepest wounds in life aren't caused by hatred, but by emotional absence. And tell me in the comments, do you think Maya was wrong for hiding Ava from Ethan for 6 years? Or do you understand why she made that decision? Because the next chapter changes everything. For the first time, Ethan will try to step into his daughter's life. But rebuilding trust is much harder than writing a check. And sometimes, children can sense regret long before adults learn how to express love. Ethan sat alone, inside his parked car for nearly 40 minutes after parent night ended. The city moved around him in blurred headlights and impatient traffic, but none of it fully registered. He had a daughter. The sentence repeated in his mind with the strange unreality of a dream. A daughter, 6 years old, alive inside a world he never knew existed. Ethan leaned back against the headrest and closed his eyes. Memories surfaced instantly now, sharper than before. Maya standing in their old apartment kitchen looking exhausted while he answered emails during dinner. Maya asking quietly, "Can we talk for 5 minutes without your phone?" Maya falling asleep alone on the couch, waiting for him to come home. At the time, Ethan believed he was sacrificing for their future. Now he wondered if he had simply abandoned the present while chasing control over tomorrow. His phone buzzed. His assistant, again. He ignored it. Then another message arrived from his sister. "Claire, you vanished from dinner last night. Are you alive?" Normally he would respond with something dry and dismissive. Tonight he typed, "I found out I have a daughter." 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, "What?" A second later, "Call me right now." Ethan almost smiled, despite himself. Claire had always been the emotional opposite of him. Where Ethan shut down, Claire confronted. Where Ethan avoided vulnerability, Claire practically weaponized honesty. He called. The moment she answered, she exploded. You have a what? A daughter. How is that your opening sentence? I'm still processing. You're telling me someone hid an entire child from you. Ethan stared through the windshield quietly. It's more complicated than that. Claire's voice softened slightly. Who's the mother? A long pause. Then, Maya. Silence. Oh, that reaction said everything. Claire remembered Maya well. Everyone did. Because Maya had once brought warmth into Ethan's cold, carefully managed world. Even Ethan's mother used to say the apartment felt brighter when Maya was there, until she wasn't. Claire spoke carefully now. I thought you loved her. I did. Then why did you lose her? The painful part was Ethan finally knew the answer. Because love without emotional presence eventually starts feeling lonely. I didn't know how to show up for people, he admitted quietly. Claire exhaled softly on the other end. That sounds more honest than anything you've said in years. Ethan rubbed his jaw tiredly. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. For starters, don't treat this like a business problem. The sentence stayed with him long after the call ended. Because Claire was right. Ethan solved problems professionally. He negotiated, controlled, managed. But fatherhood wasn't a contract, and neither was trust. The next afternoon, Maya stood at the community arts center cleaning paintbrushes, while Ava sat cross-legged nearby drawing dinosaurs wearing sunglasses. Mummy, what's wrong? Maya looked over. Why do you think something's wrong? You keep washing the same brush. Maya blinked. The brush was practically spotless already. Children noticed everything. I'm just tired. Ava nodded slowly, though she clearly didn't believe her. After a moment she asked, was that man from the bookstore your friend? There it was. Maya carefully placed the brush down. Yes. You looked sad when you saw him. The observation hit harder than Maya expected. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated histories. Ava considered this seriously. Like math? Maya laughed softly despite herself. Exactly like math. The little girl returned to coloring before quietly asking, is he my dad? Maya froze. For a second, the entire room seemed to still around her. Why would you ask that? Ava shrugged one shoulder. I don't know. He looked at me funny. Not funny. Emotional. Shocked. Broken. Maya sat beside her daughter slowly. Sweetheart. But what could she say? The truth suddenly stood at the edge of their lives, whether she was ready or not. Before she could answer, the front door opened. Maya looked up, and nearly lost her breath. Ethan, of course. Tall, composed, dressed in another expensive dark coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Yet somehow, he looked less intimidating today, more uncertain. Like a man standing outside a life he didn't know how to enter. Ava looked between them curiously. Ethan approached carefully. I called earlier. I was working. You didn't answer. That usually means someone doesn't want to talk. Fair. He accepted that, quietly. Ava stood politely. Hi again. Ethan's entire expression softened instantly when he looked at her. It happened naturally, without performance. Hi. The tenderness in his voice startled Maya more than she expected. Ethan held up a paper bag awkwardly. I brought cookies. Ava's eyes widened immediately. Maya crossed her arms. Bribery starts early? Ethan looked almost embarrassed. I panicked in a bakery. Ava giggled before looking at Maya for permission. Maya sighed softly. 1 cookie. 2? 1? Half? Maya pointed toward a chair. Sit down before you negotiate yourself into trouble. Ethan sat, and something unexpectedly fragile filled the room. Not comfort exactly. Possibility. He watched Ava chatter excitedly about dinosaurs and art projects, while crumbs collected near her fingers. Every few seconds, Ethan caught himself staring, trying to absorb details. The way she tilted her head while thinking, the way her eyebrows lifted before asking questions, the way she smiled fully without hesitation. His daughter. The realization kept hitting in waves. Ava looked at him suddenly. Do you know how to draw? Badly. That's okay. Mummy says bad art still counts. Maya smiled faintly at that. Ethan noticed. God, he had missed her smile. Not just physically. Emotionally. He missed the feeling of being near someone genuinely warm. After a while, Ava wandered toward another table to color. The moment she moved away, tension returned instantly between Ethan and Maya. She's incredible, he said quietly. Maya's expression softened, despite herself. She is. Ethan looked down briefly before forcing himself to ask, why didn't you tell me? Maya leaned against the counter slowly. I tried. He looked up sharply. What? The night I planned to tell you, you cancelled dinner because of a business emergency. Ethan remembered vaguely. Chicago investors, maybe. Or Boston. He hated that he couldn't remember clearly. Maya continued softly. Then you forgot the rescheduled dinner, too. Guilt crawled painfully through his chest. Maya, You stopped noticing me long before I left, Ethan. The words weren't cruel. That made them worse. You think I don't regret that? I think you regret it now because you finally felt the consequences. Silence. Painfully honest silence. Ethan swallowed hard. You should have still told me. Maya looked toward Ava before answering. I grew up with a father who was physically present and emotionally absent. Trust me. Sometimes that damages a child more. The sentence landed deeply because it mirrored his own childhood too closely. Ethan looked at her carefully then. Really looked. Maya seemed stronger now. Sadder too. But grounded in ways she hadn't been years ago. Life had shaped her differently. Not harder. Wiser. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. For the first time since he arrived, Maya's expression gentled. That might be the first completely honest thing you've said to me in years. Ethan almost laughed. Instead, emotion caught unexpectedly in his throat. Because the terrifying truth was simple. He knew how to build companies. He knew how to lead boardrooms. He knew how to survive pressure. But sitting here beside the woman he once loved while trying to understand his daughter felt infinitely harder than becoming a billionaire ever did. The first time Ethan spent an entire afternoon with Ava alone, he prepared for it like a business presentation, which was exactly the problem. He researched child psychology articles at 2 in the morning, bought educational games recommended online, memorized the names of her favorite dinosaur species from notes. Maya reluctantly texted him. By Saturday morning, his penthouse looked like a toy store exploded inside it, and Ethan still felt terrified. You're pacing, Claire observed from the kitchen. I'm walking. You've walked past me 17 times. Ethan checked the clock again, 10 minutes early. His stomach tightened unexpectedly. Claire watched him carefully before softening. You know she's 6, right? Not a hostile investor. That somehow feels less intimidating. Claire laughed. You're really scared. Ethan didn't deny it, because he was, not of Ava, of failing her. That fear sat heavier than he expected. At exactly noon, the elevator doors opened. Maya stepped out, holding Ava's hand. The little girl immediately froze at the sight of the massive penthouse windows overlooking Manhattan. Whoa. Ethan's nervousness eased slightly at her reaction. You like it? It looks like superheroes should live here. Claire whispered loudly toward Maya. See? Ethan sighed. Claire, what? I'm creating warmth. Ava giggled, instantly. Maya relaxed just enough for Ethan to notice. That mattered more than he wanted to admit. For the next hour, things felt surprisingly natural. Ava explored every room with endless curiosity, while Claire shamelessly spoiled her with snacks Ethan normally would never allow near white furniture. Maya stayed cautious but quieter than before, watching everything carefully from the edges. Ethan understood why. Trust wasn't rebuilt through apologies alone. It required consistency, presence, patience, things he historically struggled with most. Eventually, Ava wandered toward the enormous piano near the living room windows. You play? Ethan shook his head. My mother does. Why keep it? The question caught him off guard. He stared at the piano for a second, before answering honestly. Because some things remind us who we used to be. Ava seemed satisfied with that answer. Children accepted emotional truths, adults complicated unnecessarily. Later, while Ava colored beside Claire, Maya stepped onto the balcony for air. Ethan followed carefully after a moment. Cold wind moved gently across the city skyline. For a while, neither spoke. Then Maya said quietly, She likes you. The words carried both relief and fear. Ethan leaned against the railing. I don't know why that surprises you. Because children notice emotional inconsistency quickly. There it was again. The wound beneath everything. Ethan nodded slowly. You really think I would hurt her? I think you don't fully understand how absence affects people. He looked down briefly. I'm starting to... Maya folded her arms against the cold. Ethan, loving someone isn't the same as being emotionally available to them. I know that now. Do you? The question wasn't sarcastic. It was genuinely uncertain. That hurt more. Ethan turned toward her fully. I was terrible at relationships. You weren't terrible. She hesitated. You were disconnected. The honesty sat heavily between them. I thought providing financially was enough, he admitted quietly. My father thought the same thing. Ethan looked at her carefully. You never talked much about him. That's because there wasn't much to say. Maya stared out at the city lights. He paid bills, came home every night, never missed birthdays. That sounds decent. Until you realize someone can sit beside you for years without truly seeing you. Ethan felt that sentence deeply. Because suddenly, he understood something uncomfortable. He had become exactly the kind of man both of them once feared. Inside, Ava suddenly shouted excitedly, Mommy! Aunt Claire says Dad used to cry during cartoons. Maya blinked once, then looked at Ethan, in complete disbelief. Claire yelled back unapologetically, Toy Story 3 broke him emotionally. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I'm firing her from the family. Maya laughed. A real laugh this time. Warm. Unexpected. Dangerously familiar. And for one brief moment, Ethan remembered exactly why he once thought he would spend his entire life loving her. That night, after Maya and Ava left, silence returned to the penthouse. But it felt different now. Not emptier. Louder. Because Ava's laughter still echoed faintly through the rooms. Ethan walked slowly into the guest room Claire had helped prepare earlier that week, just in case. A small stuffed dinosaur sat neatly on the bed. He picked it up quietly, then sat down heavily at the edge of the mattress. Emotion hit him suddenly. Not dramatic tears. Something quieter. Grief for time lost. For birthdays missed. For bedtime stories never read. For scraped knees he never comforted. For 6 entire years of fatherhood stolen partly by Maya's fear, and partly by the man he used to be. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Thank you for today. Ethan stared at the message a long time before replying. Thank you for bringing her. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then finally, she's been asking questions about you all evening. His chest tightened instantly. What kind? Another pause. Mostly whether you'll disappear again. The words hit brutally hard. Because children always ask the questions adults feared most. Ethan typed slowly. Tell her, I'm not going anywhere. This time, Maya responded immediately. Be careful making promises to children. Ethan looked around the quiet room again. At the dinosaur on the bed. At the city beyond the windows. At the version of himself he no longer wanted to remain. Then he typed, I know, that's why I mean it. Across the city, Maya sat at Ava's bedside while her daughter fought sleep stubbornly. Mummy, yes? Do you think Dad likes me? Maya's heart squeezed painfully. He already does. Ava smiled sleepily into her pillow. I think he looked lonely. The observation startled Maya. Why do you say that? Because sometimes people smile with their face, but not their eyes. Children noticed everything. Maya brushed curls gently from Ava's forehead. You're very smart. I know. That made Maya laugh softly. After Ava finally fell asleep, Maya walked quietly into the living room and sat alone in the dark. Her emotions felt tangled tonight. Seeing Ethan with Ava changed something. Not completely, but enough to unsettle old certainty. Because she saw genuine tenderness in him today. Fear too, and regret. Real regret. The dangerous thing about personal growth was this. Sometimes people actually changed. And that possibility frightened Maya more than resentment ever had. Because resentment was easier. Resentment protected people from hope. Her phone lit up again unexpectedly. A message from Ethan. I know I don't deserve trust yet. Maya stared silently. Then another message appeared. But I want to learn how to be someone she can depend on. Maya closed her eyes briefly. Years ago, those words would have meant everything to her. Now they felt heavier. Because growth sounded beautiful in conversation. But consistency? Consistency revealed truth. Still, for the first time in 7 years, Ethan no longer sounded like a man trying to win an argument. He sounded like someone finally confronting himself. And somehow, that scared Maya almost as much as falling in love with him once did. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began rearranging his life in ways nobody around him expected, including himself. He stopped scheduling meetings past 6. His executives nearly revolted. He ignored them. He moved conference calls away from weekends. Started answering fewer emails at midnight. Actually used the dining table in his penthouse instead of eating over spreadsheets. Small changes, but for Ethan, they felt massive. The strangest part, none of it felt like sacrifice. Not when every adjustment created more time with Ava. On Wednesday afternoons, he picked her up from art class. Friday evenings became movie nights. Sunday mornings turned into pancake disasters. Neither of them could successfully cook. Dad, Ava announced seriously one morning while staring at a blackened pancake, I think you're committing breakfast crimes. Ethan looked offended. This is artistic cooking. This is smoke. Claire nearly fell off her chair laughing. Maya watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, trying not to smile too much. That was becoming increasingly difficult lately, because despite all her fears, Ethan kept showing up. Consistently. Not perfectly, but genuinely. And consistency changed things, especially for children. Ava had already begun talking about Ethan constantly. Dad said whales sleep vertically. Dad doesn't know how glitter works. Dad pretends he hates cartoons but watches them anyway. Each casual mention softened something inside Maya she kept trying to protect, which scared her, because healing old love could become dangerous very quickly. One rainy Friday evening, Ethan arrived late to pick Ava up. Only 15 minutes. But the moment he entered the art center, he immediately noticed the difference. Ava sat quietly near the window hugging her backpack. Not drawing, not talking, waiting. The sight hit Ethan harder than expected. The younger version of himself suddenly surfaced in memory, 10 years old, sitting outside school while his father missed another pickup because of work. That feeling had never left him. The fear of not mattering enough for someone to remember you. Ethan crouched immediately in front of Ava. "I'm sorry." She looked down. "You forgot." "No." His voice softened carefully. "I was late. That's different. But you still didn't come on time." The honesty in children could be brutal because it lacked performance. Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right." Maya watched silently from across the room. Most adults defended themselves automatically around children. Ethan didn't. That mattered. He continued gently. "You're allowed to feel upset with me." Ava finally looked at him. "Really? Really? Even if you're a grown-up?" Especially then. Something shifted in Maya hearing that, because years ago Ethan would have explained, justified, redirected. Now he simply accepted responsibility. Growth. Real growth. It was quieter than dramatic apologies. After a moment, Ava held out her hand. "Okay." Ethan smiled softly before taking it, and Maya felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. Not because the moment was grand, because it was small, tender, earned. On the drive home, rain tapped softly across the windshield, while Ava talked endlessly in the back seat about a school project involving planets. Ethan listened carefully to every word, not pretending, actually listening. Maya noticed. "You're staring," Ethan said quietly, while stopped at a red light. She looked away immediately. "I'm observing." That sounds more judgmental. It probably is. A faint smile touched his mouth. God, she remembered that smile too well. The dangerous thing about emotional history was this. Sometimes the body remembered safety before the mind allowed trust. Later that evening, Ava fell asleep halfway through a movie inside Ethan's penthouse, curled sideways beneath a blanket, one hand clutching popcorn she never finished. Ethan carefully lifted her into his arms. Maya watched from nearby. "She's getting heavy," Ethan whispered. "She'll deny that aggressively if you tell her." He smiled softly, while carrying Ava toward the guest room. Maya followed quietly behind. For several moments after Ethan tucked Ava into bed, neither adult moved. The nightlight cast soft gold shadows across the room. Peaceful. Fragile. Ethan finally spoke quietly, without looking at Maya. "I missed 6 years." There was no self-pity in his voice now. Only grief. Maya leaned lightly against the doorway. "Yes. I keep thinking about all the moments I'll never get back." She understood that pain, more than he realized, because for years, Maya watched Ava ask questions Ethan should have been there to answer. "Why don't I have a dad at school events? Do fathers braid hair? Would he like dinosaurs too?" Maya carried those conversations alone, and loneliness changes people. Still, watching Ethan now hurt differently, because she could finally see how deeply the loss affected him too. "You can't undo time," she said gently. "I know, but you can decide what kind of father you'll be now." Ethan looked over then, really looked at her. "You still believe I can become a good father?" Maya hesitated, then answered honestly, "I think you're trying harder than you ever did before." The truth lingered quietly between them. Ethan stepped closer, unconsciously. Not enough to touch, just enough for memory to awaken. "I'm sorry, Maya." She swallowed, slowly. "For what part?" His expression tightened slightly. "All of it." That almost broke her composure. Because years ago, she begged for emotional honesty from him. Now, it arrived too late, and somehow exactly when she feared it most. Maya looked away first. "You can't fix the past by apologizing beautifully." "I know. Then what are you trying to do?" Ethan answered, after a long pause. "Become someone who wouldn't hurt you that way again." The vulnerability in his voice startled her. Not polished, not strategic. Real. Maya's heart betrayed her painfully in that moment. Because despite everything, part of her still loved the man standing in front of her, and that terrified her more than anger ever could. Maya spent the next several days trying very hard not to think about Ethan. Unfortunately, Ethan had suddenly become difficult to ignore. Not because he was rich, not because he was charming, because he was present. That was the dangerous part. Presence created attachment quietly. One morning, Ava walked into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and announced proudly, "Dad says I'm genetically stubborn." Maya nearly choked on her coffee. "He said that?" Huh?" Ava climbed onto a chair. "He also said you're stubborn too. So technically this is your fault." Maya stared at her daughter in disbelief. "He's turning you against me already." Ava grinned. "No, I'm choosing chaos independently." Maya laughed, despite herself, then suddenly felt emotional. Because Ava looked happier lately. Lighter. Children bloomed visibly when they felt emotionally secure. And Ethan's consistency was beginning to create that safety. That realization both comforted and frightened Maya, because trust was slowly entering places she had spent years keeping guarded. At the same time, Ethan struggled with emotions he didn't fully understand either. Late Thursday evening, he sat alone in his office staring at a presentation he hadn't actually read in 20 minutes. His friend Daniel noticed immediately. "You've opened the same spreadsheet 6 times. Ethan blinked. "What? You're distracted." "I'm fine." Daniel laughed. "You once corrected a typo during a fire alarm. This version of you is emotionally compromised." Ethan leaned back slowly. Daniel studied him carefully. "This is about Maya?" Ethan sighed. "Is it that obvious? You've said her name 3 times during conversations completely unrelated to her." That was concerning. Daniel had known Ethan since college. He also knew the version of Ethan that existed before success hardened him emotionally. "You still love her," Daniel said quietly. Ethan looked toward the city skyline beyond his office windows. The answer came easier than expected. Yes. Not dramatic. Not conflicted. Just true. Daniel nodded slowly like he already knew. "So, what's the problem?" Ethan laughed once without humor. "I spent years emotionally neglecting the woman I loved, found out she raised our daughter alone, and now I'm trying to prove I've changed." Daniel considered that. "Okay, yeah. That's a significant romantic obstacle." Ethan rubbed tiredly at his forehead. "The worst part is understanding why she left now." His voice lowered. "Back then, I genuinely thought I was being responsible, providing, building stability. And now? Now I realize you can abandon people without physically leaving them." The honesty in the statement surprised even him. Daniel stayed quiet for a moment before asking carefully, "Do you think she's starting to trust you again?" Ethan thought about the way Maya looked at him lately. Softer, sometimes. Guarded immediately afterward. Like someone fighting herself emotionally. "I don't know," he admitted. But he wanted her to, more than he should probably allow. Saturday afternoon arrived cold and grey, carrying steady rain across the city. Maya stood inside Ava's school gymnasium, surrounded by loud children and exhausted parents during a fundraising carnival. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Glitter floated through the air like a biological threat. Someone's toddler was crying near the cupcake table. A volunteer dressed like a pirate appeared emotionally defeated already. Maya loved it. Community spaces reminded her that life was imperfect and human. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a dark coat and the unmistakable expression of a man completely unprepared for elementary school events. Ava spotted him instantly. "Dad!" She ran toward him so fast, Ethan barely had time to kneel before she crashed into his arms. The sight warmed something deep inside Maya before she could stop it. Ethan hugged Ava tightly. "Why does it smell like sugar and fear in here?" "Because children are winning." "That's concerning." Ava grabbed his hand enthusiastically. "Come on, you're helping with games." Ethan looked toward Maya helplessly. She smiled innocently. "Oh no. She volunteered you personally. Traitor. You'll survive." 2 hours later, Ethan stood beside a ring toss booth, questioning every life decision that brought him there. Ava sat nearby, laughing uncontrollably every time he lost to 7-year-olds. "You're bad at this," she informed him cheerfully. "I negotiate billion-dollar contracts. And yet Kevin, from 2nd grade, is destroying you." Kevin waved proudly, while holding another prize. Ethan narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "That child hustles professionally." Maya laughed so suddenly she had to cover her mouth. Ethan turned toward her automatically, and for a moment, the noise around them faded. God, he missed making her laugh. Not politely, not carefully, like this. Real, warm, alive. The moment stretched too long. Long enough for Maya to feel it too. She looked away first. Later, while Ava joined friends near the face-painting station, Maya and Ethan finally found a quieter corner near the gym entrance. Rain tapped softly against high windows overhead. "You look different here," Maya admitted quietly. Ethan leaned against the wall. "At a children's carnival?" "No." She studied him carefully. "Relaxed." He almost laughed at that. "I nearly lost a psychological war against ring toss. That's still more emotionally available than old you." "Fair." Ethan looked down briefly before asking, "Can I ask you something honestly?" "That depends. Did you ever hate me?" Maya seemed surprised by the question. Then, thoughtful. "No." That answer affected him more deeply than he expected. "I was angry," she continued softly. "Lonely. Hurt." Her eyes met his, but not hateful. Ethan swallowed slowly. "Sometimes I wished you'd cheated on me." His eyebrows lifted immediately. "That's unexpectedly specific. Because at least cheating would have been obvious." Her voice remained calm but painfully honest. "Emotional neglect is harder to explain. People don't see it happening." The words settled heavily between them. Maya continued quietly, "You never screamed at me, never insulted me, never controlled me. But eventually I felt emotionally invisible beside you." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, because every sentence was true, painfully true. "I would have fixed it if I understood," he said quietly. Maya's expression softened sadly. I know that now. That hurt almost worse. Because she genuinely believed him. Meaning the destruction of their relationship came less from cruelty and more from emotional immaturity neither of them recognized in time. Nearby, children burst into laughter again, life continuing around old heartbreak. Ethan looked toward Ava across the gymnasium. She deserves better than what we were. Maya followed his gaze. Yes, and I want to give her that. Maya studied him carefully then. You really mean that? It wasn't a question anymore. Ethan nodded once, without hesitation. Something fragile shifted inside Maya again. Because she spent years convincing herself Ethan would never truly change. Now she wasn't certain anymore. And uncertainty was dangerous, when old love still existed underneath the surface. As the carnival ended later that evening, Ava fell asleep in the back seat during the drive home. Rain blurred softly across the windshield, while quiet music played low through the car speakers. Maya sat beside Ethan in unusual silence. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Finally, Ethan spoke quietly. I used to think success would automatically make me someone people felt safe with. Maya turned slightly toward him. But success doesn't teach emotional presence. The honesty in his voice felt raw tonight. Real. Maya looked out the window again before answering softly. No. Usually pain teaches that. Neither spoke after that. But somewhere in the silence between them, something long broken had quietly begun trying to heal. The first time Ava called Ethan during a work meeting, every executive in the room froze. Not because the phone rang, because Ethan answered it. Immediately. Hey, Bug. Around the conference table, several men exchanged confused looks. Ethan Cole usually ignored calls from everyone during meetings, including investors. Ava's tiny voice spilled through the speaker loudly enough for nearby people to hear. Dad, Mommy says octopuses have 3 hearts. Is that true, or is she spreading misinformation? Ethan blinked once. Across the table, Daniel pressed his lips together, trying not to laugh. It's true, Ethan answered seriously. Ava gasped dramatically. 3? Apparently, octopuses are emotionally overachieving. A small burst of laughter came through the phone. Then Maya's voice in the background. Give me my phone back before you interrogate him about sea animals for an hour. Something in Ethan softened, instantly hearing her voice. Too late, he said quietly. For half a second, silence lingered strangely between them. Familiar, dangerous. Then Ava returned loudly. Okay. Bye, love you. The words hit Ethan so unexpectedly, he almost forgot to answer. Love you too. The call ended. Silence filled the conference room. One executive finally cleared his throat awkwardly. So, the Chicago projections? But Ethan barely heard him. Because his daughter had just told him she loved him for the first time. And somehow that simple sentence mattered more than every contract sitting on the table combined. That evening, Ethan arrived at Maya's apartment carrying groceries and emotional confusion. Maya opened the door cautiously. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Ethan stood there, holding pasta sauce like a deeply distressed billionaire. She said, she loves me. Maya blinked, then immediately understood. Oh. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. What am I supposed to do with that? Maya stared at him for a second, before laughing softly. You're panicking because your child loves you? She said it casually. That's usually how children say it. I thought there would be more warning. Maya shook her head, still smiling despite herself. Ethan, she's 6. Not a tax auditor. He exhaled heavily. I didn't know it would feel this terrifying. Something about his honesty warmed her unexpectedly. Because years ago, Ethan would have hidden emotions like this beneath sarcasm or distraction. Now he simply admitted them. Maya stepped aside to let him in. Congratulations. You're emotionally attached to your daughter. I was emotionally attached before. You bought her 6 dinosaur books in 1 week. She likes dinosaurs. She also likes glitter glue. You wisely avoided that emotional disaster. Ethan actually smiled, and Maya hated how naturally she still responded to it. Inside the apartment, Ava sat on the living room floor building a cardboard spaceship out of old cereal boxes. She looked up brightly. Dad. Ethan's entire expression softened automatically. Maya noticed every single time. That frightened her more than it should. Your engineering project looks concerning, Ethan observed. It's a space cruiser. It looks highly unsafe. That's because you don't understand innovation. Maya covered her mouth, trying not to laugh again. Later that night, after dinner, Ethan helped Ava finish homework while Maya cleaned dishes nearby. Or rather, he attempted to help. Dad, Ava sighed dramatically. You're overthinking second-grade math. I'm approaching it strategically. It's subtraction. Ethan narrowed his eyes at the worksheet. Numbers shouldn't travel backward. It creates instability. Ava burst into giggles. Maya leaned against the counter, smiling quietly. The apartment felt warm tonight. Full, alive. For years, Maya convinced herself peace only existed in carefully controlled independence. Now she watched Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor, arguing with a 6-year-old about subtraction, while laughter filled her apartment. And suddenly, loneliness felt more visible than before. That realization unsettled her deeply. Because healing sometimes reopened, needs people learned to silence. Later, after Ava finally fell asleep on the couch mid-movie, Maya carried a blanket over carefully. Ethan stood nearby, watching. "She trusts you now," Maya said softly. The statement carried both wonder and fear. Ethan looked at Ava quietly. "I'm trying to deserve it." Maya folded her arms lightly. "That's the thing about children." Her voice lowered. "They usually love first and evaluate later." The sentence lingered heavily. Because adults did the opposite. Ethan turned toward Maya slowly. "And you?" Her pulse shifted immediately. "What about me? Do you trust me at all?" The room suddenly felt smaller. Maya looked away first. "Some days. Only some? You hurt me for years without realizing it." The honesty sat quietly between them. Ethan nodded once. "I know." "No, Ethan." Maya looked back at him now. "I don't think you fully do." That caught him. Maya stepped closer to the window, voice calm but deeply emotional underneath. "You know what the worst part was?" He stayed silent. "You made me feel guilty for needing emotional connection." Pain moved visibly across his face. "You'd come home exhausted, and I'd tell myself not to ask for too much." Her eyes glistened faintly now. "Not too much conversation, not too much affection, not too much attention." Ethan swallowed hard, and after a while, she whispered, "I stopped asking for anything at all." The confession broke something open inside him, because suddenly he understood the full weight of what emotional neglect actually meant. Not screaming, not betrayal. The slow starvation of intimacy. "I never wanted you to feel alone," he said quietly. "I know." That answer devastated him more than anger could have, because Maya truly believed he never intended harm, which meant love alone had not been enough to save them. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Ethan asked the question he feared most. "Do you still love me?" Maya's breath caught softly. Silence stretched between them like exposed wire. Finally, she answered honestly, "That's the problem." And Ethan felt his heart stumble painfully inside his chest. After that conversation, everything between Ethan and Maya changed, not dramatically, quietly, like two people suddenly becoming aware of fragile ice beneath their feet. They were more careful around each other now, more aware, more emotionally exposed, and somehow, that made every small interaction feel heavier. The next week, Ethan found himself noticing details he once overlooked effortlessly. The way Maya rubbed her wrist when stressed, how she hummed absent-mindedly while cooking, how tired she looked after long workdays, even when she insisted she was fine. Years ago, he would have missed all of it. Now, he noticed too much. One Thursday evening, he arrived at Maya's apartment carrying takeout, and found her sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills. She immediately tried gathering them into a pile. Too late. Ethan had already seen enough. "Maya, it's handled." That didn't answer anything. She exhaled quietly. "The art center lost a sponsor." "How bad?" I said, "It's handled." There it was again. Pride. The same pride he once mistook for independence, when really, it often hid exhaustion. Ethan sat across from her slowly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I'm not your responsibility." The sentence bothered him immediately. "You're Ava's mother, and I've managed fine without your money for 6 years. Ethan leaned back slightly. "I wasn't offering charity." "Good, because I wouldn't take it." He studied her carefully then. "Maya, when was the last time you let someone help you?" Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No." His voice softened. "What wasn't fair was you carrying everything alone because you stopped believing someone would show up consistently." The words hit close enough to make her look away, because he wasn't entirely wrong. Independence became survival for Maya a long time ago, and survival habits were difficult to surrender even when safety appeared. Ethan spoke more gently now. "You don't have to prove strength every second." Maya laughed softly without humor. "That's easy to say when the world always catches you if you fall." That landed, because privilege had protected Ethan from many forms of fear. Meanwhile, Maya learned years ago that instability punished women differently, especially mothers. Before Ethan could respond, Ava rushed into the kitchen, holding paper stars. "Emergency." Both adults turned immediately. Ava climbed onto a chair dramatically. "School project. I need help building a solar system tonight or Mrs. Ramirez will spiritually destroy me." Ethan blinked. "Spiritually?" "She uses disappointed silence." Maya covered a laugh. And just like that, tension eased temporarily beneath glitter, glue, and cardboard planets. 3 hours later, Ethan sat on the living room floor with silver paint on his hands, while Ava proudly held up Saturn. "It looks weird." "It's a gas giant," Ethan defended. "They're naturally suspicious." Ava giggled. Maya watched from nearby while warmth slowly spread through her chest again. This was the dangerous thing about healing. Ordinary moments started mattering deeply. Not grand romance. Not dramatic declarations. Just presence. Ethan staying late to help with homework. Remembering Ava's favorite cereal. Listening when Maya spoke instead of multitasking through conversations. Small things. But small things were exactly what their relationship lacked years ago. That frightened Maya more than she wanted to admit. Later that night, after Ava finally slept, Ethan helped clean glitter from the coffee table. An impossible task. "I think it multiplied," he muttered. "Glitter survives nuclear disasters." He smiled faintly. "You seem less stressed tonight." Maya shrugged lightly. Temporary, emotional surrender. That sounds healthy. It's alarming, actually. Their eyes met briefly. Too briefly. Because both of them felt it. The growing emotional pull neither wanted to name too quickly. Ethan set down the rag slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "You always do." "What made you finally leave back then?" Maya went still. For a moment, only soft rain filled the silence outside. Then she answered quietly, "You missed my mother's funeral." Ethan froze completely. The memory slammed into him instantly. A hotel deal in Chicago. A delayed flight. A voicemail he promised to answer later. Oh God. Maya continued softly, not accusing anymore. "Just honest. You said you'd make it." Her eyes lowered. "I kept checking the doors during the service, hoping you'd walk in." Pain moved visibly across Ethan's face. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are." "No." His voice cracked slightly. "Maya, I forgot." The admission sounded horrifying out loud. "Because it was." Maya nodded once. "That's when I realized something." Her voice stayed calm despite the sadness underneath. "You loved me. But I wasn't emotionally present in your priorities anymore." The truth cut deeply, because Ethan finally understood it now. Success had consumed him so completely that he treated emotional intimacy like something flexible, something postponable. Until eventually the postponement became permanent. He sat down heavily on the couch. "I hated myself after you left." Maya looked surprised. "You never showed it." "I didn't know how." That was the tragedy of Ethan Cole. He felt deeply, but expressed poorly. And relationships could not survive forever on unspoken love. Maya sat beside him carefully, leaving space between them. "You know what the hardest part was?" Ethan looked over slowly. "I kept hoping you'd come after me." His chest tightened sharply. "I almost did." "Almost doesn't change anything." "No, it didn't." Silence settled again. Heavy, tender, painfully intimate. Then Ethan asked quietly, "Why didn't you ever contact me after Ava was born?" Maya stared ahead for several seconds before answering, "Because I was terrified she'd grow attached to someone emotionally unavailable." That sentence broke him differently, because now he finally understood. Maya hadn't hidden Ava out of cruelty. She had hidden her out of fear. Fear created by the man Ethan used to be, and that realization carried unbearable weight. Maya looked toward him softly now. "You've changed." The words barely existed above a whisper. Ethan's eyes met hers immediately. "Have I changed enough?" That question lingered between them longer than either expected, because neither of them truly knew the answer yet. And somewhere underneath all the history, regret, healing, and unresolved love, both of them were beginning to understand something terrifying. Falling in love the first time had been easy. Learning how to trust each other again would be much harder. If this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional journey like this one. And tell me honestly in the comments, do you think emotional neglect can hurt just as much as betrayal in a relationship? Because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from being cheated on. It comes from slowly feeling unseen by the person you love most. And in the next chapter, Ethan and Maya will finally confront the emotions they've both been avoiding. But just because two people still love each other doesn't mean they know how to rebuild what they broke, especially when a child's heart is now involved. The first time Ethan saw Ava cry because of him, it happened over something small, which somehow made it worse. It was a Tuesday evening, rainy again. Maya had an emergency meeting at the arts center, so Ethan volunteered to watch Ava for a few hours at the penthouse. Everything started fine. They ordered pizza, built blanket forts in the living room, argued intensely about whether dinosaurs would survive modern traffic laws. Normal things. Happy things. Then Ethan's phone rang. One call became two became six. A hotel issue in Miami. Investors panicking. Legal complications. Old life demanding attention. At first, Ethan tried balancing both worlds at once. "Ava, give me 2 minutes." "Okay." 5 minutes later. "Dad, look what I drew." 1 second. Bug. 10 minutes later, Dad. "Just a minute." The dangerous thing about old habits was how quietly they returned. Ethan moved toward the balcony, still talking into his headset, while reviewing documents sent to his tablet. Behind him, the apartment slowly became quieter. Too quiet. Nearly 40 minutes passed before Ethan finally ended the call. Exhausted, he walked back into the living room, expecting Ava to still be building forts. Instead, he found her sitting silently near the windows, hugging her knees. The television played softly to nobody, and suddenly, Ethan recognized the expression on her face immediately. Disappointment. Trying very hard not to become sadness. The same expression he once saw on Maya countless times. Guilt hit instantly. Hard. Ava. She looked up quickly. It's okay. Children always said that when it wasn't okay. Ethan crouched beside her slowly. I'm sorry. You were busy. There was no anger in her voice. That hurt more, because emotional disappointment spoken quietly carried deeper weight than yelling ever could. Ethan looked at the untouched drawing paper beside her. A family portrait. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a badly drawn sun. His chest tightened painfully. You waited for me? Ava shrugged lightly. You said, 1 minute. The sentence broke something inside him. Because suddenly, he was no longer seeing Ava. He was seeing Maya sitting alone through cancelled dinners, forgotten conversations, half-finished moments. Seeing his younger self, waiting outside school for a father too distracted to arrive emotionally. Cycles repeated, unless someone consciously stopped them. Ethan sat down fully on the carpet beside her. Then he did something old Ethan never would have done. He turned off his phone completely. Not silent. Off. Ava blinked in surprise. What if someone needs you? Ethan looked at her carefully. They can wait. The answer came out simple, but it carried years of emotional learning underneath it. Ava studied him for another second, before quietly scooting closer. Small movement. Huge forgiveness. Children healed faster than adults sometimes. But Ethan understood something now. That innocence deserved protection, not carelessness. Later that night, after Maya returned, she immediately sensed something had happened. Not bad exactly, just emotional. Ava fell asleep early on the couch, while Ethan stood near the kitchen, unusually quiet. Maya lowered her voice. What happened? Ethan stared down at the counter. I did it again. Fear moved across her face, instantly. Did what? I disappeared, while sitting right beside someone. The honesty startled her. Ethan explained quietly what happened with the calls, and for the first time, Maya saw genuine shame in him about this pattern. Not defensiveness, not excuses. Awareness. You turned your phone off? She asked softly. He nodded once. I should have done it sooner. Maya leaned lightly against the counter. You noticed faster this time. Ethan laughed bitterly. Still too late. No. Her voice gentled. Years ago, you wouldn't have noticed at all. That truth lingered between them. Growth wasn't perfection. It was awareness followed by effort. Ethan rubbed tiredly at his face. I scared myself tonight. Why? Because for 40 minutes I became the exact version of myself I promised never to be again. Maya understood that fear intimately. People who grew up emotionally neglected often worried about repeating the damage without realizing it. Cycles lived quietly inside behavior. I don't expect perfection, she said carefully. Ethan looked up immediately. What do you expect? Maya held his gaze longer this time. Presence. The word settled deeply inside him. Not brilliance, not wealth, not grand gestures. Presence. How tragic that something so emotionally simple could be so difficult for some people to learn. The next weekend, Ava's school hosted a father-daughter breakfast. Ethan nearly panicked. Not because he didn't want to go, because he wanted to go too much. You bought 3 shirts, Claire observed while entering his penthouse unexpectedly. I'm selecting responsibly. You're spiraling emotionally through business, casual clothing. Ethan ignored her. Claire softened after a moment. You really love that little girl. The answer arrived instantly. Yes. No hesitation anymore. That frightened him slightly. Because loving someone this deeply created vulnerability he spent years avoiding. Claire sat beside him quietly. You know what's weird? She said, what? You seem more alive lately. Ethan looked down briefly. Because she was right. For years his life operated efficiently. Now it actually felt emotionally awake. The breakfast turned out louder and messier than Ethan expected. Tiny pancakes, sticky syrup, children screaming about orange juice. Ava loved every second of it. She proudly dragged Ethan around, introducing him to classmates. This is my dad. Every time she said it, something inside Ethan shifted emotionally. Not ego, responsibility, belonging. At one point, Ava ran toward the restroom with friends, leaving Ethan temporarily alone near the cafeteria wall. That was when another parent approached him. A tired-looking man, holding coffee. You're Ava's father, right? Ethan nodded cautiously. The man smiled faintly. She talks about you constantly. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in Ethan's chest. The father continued. You showed up at the right time. The sentence lingered after he walked away. Right time. Ethan wasn't sure he deserved those words, because 6 years late hardly felt right. Still, maybe late presence mattered more than permanent absence. Across the cafeteria, Maya watched Ethan laughing quietly, while helping Ava open syrup packets. And for the first time in years, something dangerous returned fully to her chest. Hope. Not naive hope. Careful hope. The kind people feel when someone finally becomes who they needed long ago. And that kind of hope was terrifying, because if Ethan failed again, this time it wouldn't only break her heart, it would break Ava's too. A week later, Ethan received a phone call that nearly unraveled everything he had been rebuilding emotionally. His mother collapsed during a charity event. Minor stroke. Stable condition. Doctors optimistic. Still, hearing the word stroke sent cold fear through his entire body. By the time Ethan arrived at the hospital, old instincts had already taken over. Control, efficiency, emotional shutdown. He spoke calmly with doctors, handled paperwork, arranged specialists. But inside, panic moved heavily beneath the surface. Claire noticed immediately. You're doing it again. Ethan looked over sharply. Doing what? Turning into a machine instead of a person. I'm handling things. You're avoiding feelings. He almost snapped back automatically, then stopped, because she wasn't wrong. The terrifying thing about emotional habits was how naturally they resurfaced during stress. That evening, Maya arrived at the hospital with Ava carrying sandwiches nobody asked for. The moment Ethan saw them walking down the hallway, exhaustion hit him all at once. Ava ran forward immediately. Dad. Ethan caught her instinctively, holding her tighter than usual. Children sensed fear quickly. Ava leaned back slightly. Are you okay? He wanted to say yes automatically. Instead, he answered honestly. Not really. Maya noticed the difference instantly. Old Ethan never admitted emotional vulnerability aloud, not even during pain. She handed him coffee gently. How's your mom? Stable. That's good. Yeah, but his voice still sounded distant. Later, Ava sat beside Claire coloring quietly, while Maya followed Ethan toward the hospital vending machines. He looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Maya watched him for a moment before speaking softly. You don't have to carry everything alone. Ethan stared at the vending machine without seeing it. I don't know how not to. There it was again. That painful honesty he used to avoid completely. Maya leaned against the wall beside him. When my mom got sick, I tried controlling everything too. Ethan looked over slowly, but eventually, I realized something. Her voice softened. People don't only need solutions during hard moments. She paused. They need emotional presence. The words settled deeply, because suddenly Ethan understood another painful truth. He learned how to solve problems before learning how to sit with emotions. That imbalance damaged almost every important relationship in his life. I spent years thinking emotions made people weaker, he admitted quietly. Maya's expression gentled. That sounds like something your father taught you. It was, completely. Ethan laughed once without humor. He respected achievement, not vulnerability. And now? Ethan looked through the hospital hallway toward Ava, laughing softly beside Claire. Now I think vulnerability might be the only reason relationships survive difficult seasons. Maya felt something ache warmly inside her hearing that, because years ago, Ethan could never have said something like that aloud. Growth had changed him deeply. Not perfectly, but genuinely. That realization became harder to resist emotionally. Later that night, Ethan's mother finally woke fully. Margaret Cole looked weaker than Ethan remembered ever seeing her. Still elegant, still composed, but fragile now in ways age eventually made unavoidable. When Ethan entered quietly, she smiled faintly. You look terrified. You had a stroke, and you still look more frightened than I feel. He sat carefully beside her bed. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Margaret said softly, Claire told me Maya came. Ethan nodded once. And Ava too. Emotion flickered across his mother's face immediately at her granddaughter's name. Margaret adored Ava already, mostly because the little girl treated wealth and status with complete indifference. Last week, Ava informed her, you dress like rich Christmas decorations. Margaret laughed for 10 straight minutes. His mother studied him quietly now. You love them. Ethan didn't bother denying it anymore. Yes. Margaret's eyes softened sadly. Then don't repeat your father's mistakes. The sentence hit sharply. Ethan looked down. I already did. Not completely. She reached carefully for his hand. Your father never learned from his emotional distance. Her voice weakened slightly. You are. That mattered more than Ethan expected. Because maybe growth didn't erase damage, but perhaps it prevented future damage from continuing. The next few days blurred together between hospital visits and work emergencies. And slowly, Ethan noticed something important. Every stressful moment now revealed who emotionally grounded him most. Maya, always Maya. She brought food when he forgot to eat, reminded him to sleep, listened without demanding emotional perfection, and for the first time in years, Ethan stopped feeling alone during difficulty. That realization terrified him slightly, because dependence required trust. One rainy evening after visiting his mother, Ethan drove Maya home, while Ava slept curled in the back seat. Soft music played quietly through the speakers. The city glowed wet and gold outside the windows. Maya finally broke the silence. "You've been quieter lately." Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Thinking. Dangerous activity. He smiled faintly. Then, after a long pause, "I wasted a lot of years emotionally." Maya turned slightly toward him. "What brought that on?" "My mother said not to become my father." Maya stayed quiet. Ethan continued softly, "And I realized I already had." The vulnerability in his voice felt heavy tonight. Raw. Maya answered carefully. "No." She shook her head lightly. "You were becoming him. That difference mattered." Ethan looked over briefly. "Do you really believe people can change that much?" "Yes." The answer came immediately, because Maya had watched him changing slowly in real time, learning, listening, showing up. The version of Ethan beside her now was emotionally unrecognizable from the man she left 7 years ago. Still, fear lingered, because healing trust after emotional abandonment required more than love. It required safety, and safety took time. When they arrived outside Maya's apartment building, neither moved immediately. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. Ava still slept peacefully behind them. Then Ethan spoke quietly. "I think losing you was the first thing that ever forced me to confront myself honestly." Maya's breath caught slightly. "Ethan, I'm serious." He looked at her fully now. "Before you left, I genuinely thought being a good provider automatically made me a good partner." Pain moved softly across Maya's expression. "And after? I realized people can feel profoundly lonely beside someone who loves them." Silence filled the car. Heavy. Intimate, truthful. Then Maya asked the question sitting inside her for weeks now. "If Ava didn't exist, do you think we would have found each other again?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "Yes." The certainty in his voice startled her. "Why?" "Because I never stopped looking for pieces of you in every room after you left." Maya looked away immediately, emotions rising too fast inside her chest, and for the first time since Ethan returned to their lives, she truly began fearing she might fall in love with him all over again. Maya tried creating distance after that conversation in the car. Not obvious distance, just enough emotional space to breathe again, because Ethan's honesty had become increasingly dangerous, not manipulative, not performative, real, and real emotions were harder to defend against. For several days, Maya answered texts politely but briefly, declined dinner invitations, avoided lingering conversations, left quickly after Ava's school activities. Ethan noticed immediately. Of course he did. Old Ethan would have missed the shift entirely. This version of him recognized emotional withdrawal the moment it appeared, which meant he also recognized the reason behind it. Fear. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan arrived at the art center to pick Ava up and found Maya reorganizing paint supplies alone. Ava was still finishing class upstairs. The tension between them appeared instantly. Subtle, careful, heavy. Ethan leaned lightly against the doorway. "You've been avoiding me." Maya kept organizing brushes. "I've been busy." That sounded believable for almost 3 seconds. She sighed softly but didn't look at him. Ethan stepped closer, carefully. "Did I say something wrong?" That finally made her turn. "No." Her voice stayed calm. "That's the problem." He waited quietly. Maya folded her arms loosely. "You're saying all the right things lately." "Because I mean them." "I know." There it was again. That terrifying honesty between them. Maya lowered her eyes briefly. "And I don't know what to do with that yet." Ethan's chest tightened softly. Not rejection, fear. He understood fear now. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight," he said quietly. Maya laughed faintly. "Good. Because emotional damage doesn't heal on billionaire timelines." "Fair, very fair." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then what do you need from me?" The question lingered longer than expected, because Maya wasn't entirely sure anymore. Years ago, the answer was simple. Attention, presence, effort. Now, Ethan was giving her those things consistently, and that changed everything. Before Maya could answer, Ava came racing downstairs carrying a glitter-covered paper volcano. "Emergency science." Ethan blinked. "That sentence feels threatening." "It erupts tomorrow." "Comforting." Ava narrowed her eyes dramatically. "You don't respect innovation." Maya smiled helplessly, while Ethan took the volcano carefully like handling explosives. And just like that, Tension softened again beneath ordinary life. Later that evening, Ethan helped Ava build the eruption mechanism at Maya's apartment, which quickly became disastrous. Red food coloring exploded across the counter. Baking soda somehow reached the ceiling. Ethan wore vinegar, accidentally. Ava laughed so hard, she nearly fell off her chair. Dad, you're terrible at science. I'm a businessman. That's not helping your case. Maya stood frozen near the sink, laughing uncontrollably for the first time in weeks. Real laughter. The kind that bent her forward slightly, while tears gathered in her eyes. Ethan stopped moving, because for a second, he forgot about volcanoes completely. God, he missed this. Not just her smile, her joy. He used to think love was built through major moments. Now he understood. Love survived through ordinary moments people chose to fully inhabit together. Maya eventually noticed him staring. Her laughter softened slowly. And suddenly, the room felt too quiet again, too aware. Ava looked between them suspiciously. Why are you both being weird? Neither answered immediately. Smart child. Very smart child. That night, after Ava slept, Maya walked Ethan to the door. The apartment still smelled faintly like vinegar and disaster. I'll pay for the food coloring damage, Ethan said. You already paid emotionally through humiliation. He smiled softly. Silence followed, longer this time. Then Ethan asked quietly, why does this scare you so much? Maya looked down briefly. Because I already survived losing you once. The confession hit him hard. You think you'll lose me again? I think people fall back into old versions of themselves under pressure. Her eyes lifted carefully to his, and life always brings pressure eventually. Ethan understood the fear. Because honestly, he feared it too, not becoming careless again intentionally, but unconsciously. Patterns learned in childhood rarely disappeared completely. Still, he answered honestly, I can't promise perfection. Maya stayed silent, but I can promise awareness now. That mattered more than he realized. Awareness changed behavior. Awareness interrupted cycles. Maya's voice softened slightly. You really are different. Ethan stepped a little closer, unconsciously. So are you. The air shifted immediately. Familiar, charged, dangerously intimate. Maya felt it first in her chest. That old pull toward him. She spent years burying beneath survival and motherhood. Ethan looked at her the way he used to, before work consumed everything. Present, focused, emotionally there. And suddenly, she hated how much she still wanted that version of him. Ethan's voice lowered gently. Maya. The way he said her name nearly undid her completely. Then, Mummy. Both of them jumped apart instantly as Ava appeared sleepily in the hallway holding her blanket. I had a bad dream. Maya immediately moved toward her daughter. Ethan stepped back, regaining composure slowly. Ava rubbed her eyes before looking suspiciously between them again. Why do grown-ups always stop talking when I walk in? Maya coughed lightly. We were discussing volcanoes. Ava narrowed her eyes harder. You're bad liars. Ethan laughed softly despite himself. And something about the sound warmed the apartment in a way Maya wasn't prepared for. Later, after Ava finally settled back asleep, Ethan drove home through quiet streets feeling emotionally restless. Not unhappy, just exposed. Because tonight made one truth impossible to ignore anymore. He wasn't simply rebuilding a relationship with his daughter. He was falling in love with Maya all over again. Except this time, he fully understood what losing her would cost. 2 weeks later, Ethan made a mistake. Not a catastrophic mistake. Not cheating. Not cruelty. Not abandonment. Something smaller, which made it worse somehow. Because smaller mistakes resembled old patterns more closely. It started with a business trip to Los Angeles. 3 days. Important investors. Impossible to avoid. Ethan told Maya about it over dinner, while Ava aggressively decorated pancakes with whipped cream nearby. I'll be back Friday night, he explained. Ava frowned immediately. That's too many sleeps. Ethan smiled softly. I know. Can't rich people use Zoom? Maya nearly laughed into her coffee. Ethan sighed dramatically. Unfortunately, capitalism remains stubborn. Ava looked unconvinced, but eventually accepted it. Maya noticed Ethan watching Ava carefully afterward, like he feared disappointing her already. You're allowed to work, Maya said quietly later, while Ava brushed her teeth. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter. That's not what worries me. She understood immediately. You're afraid of becoming emotionally absent again. He didn't need to say it aloud anymore. That night before leaving, Ethan promised Ava he would call every evening. And he meant it. Completely. The first night, he called from his hotel room and listened patiently while Ava explained why octopuses were emotionally superior sea creatures. The second night, he called between meetings just to hear her say, good night. Everything felt fine. Until Thursday. The investor dinner ran late, then later, then worse. Phones buzzed endlessly. Contracts changed suddenly. Everyone wanted immediate answers. By midnight Los Angeles time, Ethan finally reached his hotel room exhausted and froze. 3 missed calls from Ava. 1 text from Maya. She waited up for you. Guilt slammed into him instantly. Hard enough to feel physical. Without hesitation, he called immediately despite the hour. Maya answered quietly. She's asleep now. Ethan sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I lost track of time. Silence. Not angry silence. Disappointed silence. Somehow worse. I know, Maya said softly. The familiar shame returned instantly inside him. I'm sorry. Another pause. Then Maya spoke carefully. She tried staying awake for almost 2 hours. His chest tightened painfully. She kept saying, maybe Dad got busy saving hotels. Ethan closed his eyes. God, there it was again. The exact same wound repeating itself through generations. You think I don't realize what this looks like? He whispered. Maya's voice gentled slightly. Ethan, no. He rubbed his forehead tiredly. This is exactly how it started before. Small disappointments, small delays, small emotional absences that slowly become habits. Fear moved beneath every word. Real fear. Maya recognized it immediately. You missed 1 phone call. But she noticed. Yes, Maya admitted honestly. Because she loves you. That sentence somehow hurt and healed simultaneously. Ethan stared out the hotel window toward unfamiliar city lights. I hate that I'm capable of repeating this. Maya stayed quiet for several seconds before answering softly. You know the difference between now and before? What? You actually notice the emotional impact immediately. That mattered more than she realized, because awareness interrupted cycles. Still, Ethan barely slept that night. The next afternoon he boarded a private flight home early, cancelling 2 meetings without hesitation. Old Ethan would never have done that. But old Ethan understood profit better than emotional priorities. When Ethan arrived at Maya's apartment Friday evening, Ava opened the door wearing dinosaur pajamas and immediate suspicion. You forgot. No hello, no hug, just honesty. Ethan crouched instantly. I did. And I'm really sorry. Ava crossed her arms. You promised. Children remembered promises with terrifying accuracy. I know. You said every night. I should have called sooner. Ava looked down quietly. You made me sad. The simple confession nearly destroyed him emotionally. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just truthful. Ethan lowered his voice carefully. You're allowed to feel upset with me. Ava finally looked at him again. Really? Really? Most adults tried escaping accountability around children. Ethan no longer did. Because he finally understood something important. Children didn't need perfection. They needed honesty and repair. After a long moment, Ava stepped forward slowly and hugged him. Forgiveness. Small, fragile, powerful. Ethan held her tightly, emotion catching unexpectedly in his throat. Across the room, Maya watched silently. And something shifted inside her again. Because years ago Ethan would have defended himself endlessly, instead of simply accepting emotional responsibility. This version of him stayed present through discomfort. That mattered deeply. Later that evening, after Ava fell asleep early curled against Ethan during a movie, Maya quietly handed him tea in the kitchen. You came home early. I wanted to fix it. You can't always fix emotional disappointment immediately. I know. The answer came too fast. Too honestly. Maya studied him carefully. You really are terrified of hurting her. Ethan looked toward the sleeping little girl, visible from the couch. Yes. No hesitation. Then, after a pause, and you, the vulnerability in his voice unsettled her instantly. Because he wasn't flirting. He was confessing. Maya looked down into her tea. You didn't used to say things out loud. I didn't know how. Ethan leaned back against the counter tiredly. I spent most of my life believing emotions were burdens people should manage privately. And now? Now I think silence damages relationships more than honesty ever could. The growth in that sentence hit Maya deeply, painfully. Because years ago, hearing words like this from Ethan would have changed everything. Now they arrived wrapped in timing, history, regret, and fear. Maya exhaled softly. I don't know how to trust this fully yet. You don't have to rush. But you want me to... He smiled faintly, desperately. That almost made her laugh. Almost. Instead, silence settled between them again. Not uncomfortable anymore. Intimate. Then Ethan asked quietly, Can I tell you something selfish? Maya looked up carefully. I don't think I ever stopped loving you. Her breath caught instantly. There it was. Finally spoken aloud. The truth both of them had been carefully circling for weeks. Maya's heart pounded painfully against her ribs, because the terrifying part wasn't hearing it. The terrifying part was knowing she felt it too. Ethan watched emotion move across her face slowly, then added quietly, But this time, I want to love you correctly. And Maya realized in that moment, that her biggest fear was no longer Ethan failing her again. It was the possibility that he truly had changed, because that meant she no longer knew how to keep protecting her heart from him. For the first time in 7 years, Maya allowed herself to imagine a future that included Ethan again. And honestly, that terrified her more than raising Ava alone ever had, because independence was predictable, loneliness was manageable, disappointment could be survived. Hope was the dangerous thing. Hope made people vulnerable to loss. The realization followed her everywhere after Ethan confessed he never stopped loving her. At the grocery store, during art classes, late at night, while Ava slept beside stuffed dinosaurs. Especially during quiet moments, because quiet moments left room for truth. And the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. She still loved him too. One Saturday morning, Maya stood in her kitchen watching Ethan attempt to braid Ava's hair with the concentration of a man diffusing explosives. "This feels technically impossible," he muttered. Ava sighed dramatically. "Dad, you can't negotiate with hair. I negotiate with billionaires. And yet, the ponytail is winning." Maya laughed softly into her coffee. Ethan looked up automatically at the sound. That small reflex alone nearly unraveled her emotionally, because years ago he stopped noticing sounds like that. Now he noticed everything. Presence. Again and again, it came back to presence. Eventually, Ethan managed something loosely resembling a braid. Ava touched it suspiciously. "I look like a stressed pineapple." "That feels harsh. It feels accurate." Maya covered her mouth, laughing harder, and suddenly the apartment felt painfully warm. Not temperature, emotionally, like family. That realization scared Maya enough that she retreated into the kitchen under the excuse of washing dishes already clean. Ethan noticed immediately. Of course he did. A few minutes later, he stepped quietly beside her. "You disappeared." Maya kept her eyes on the sink. "I'm right here. You know what I mean." She exhaled softly. Ethan lowered his voice carefully. "Talk to me." God. Years ago she begged for exactly this kind of emotional attentiveness. Now she barely knew how to receive it safely. Maya finally turned toward him. "You're making this hard." "What part?" "Trusting you again." Pain flickered gently across his expression. "I know." "No," she whispered. "I don't think you fully do." He stayed quiet. Maya folded her arms lightly. When someone emotionally disappears on you long enough, eventually you start teaching yourself not to need them. The honesty between them had become almost unbearable lately, because neither hid anymore. Ethan nodded slowly. "And now? Now you're showing up consistently enough that I don't know how to keep pretending I don't need you." The confession stunned both of them slightly. Ethan's eyes softened immediately. "Maya." She looked away first, because hearing tenderness in his voice still weakened her. Before either could say more, Ava suddenly burst into the kitchen holding cereal. Why are grown-ups always whispering dramatically? Neither answered quickly enough. Ava narrowed her eyes. "You're definitely being weird again." That child noticed absolutely everything. Later that afternoon, the three of them visited Central Park together. Cold autumn air moved gently through orange leaves, while Ava raced ahead, chasing pigeons with chaotic determination. Maya walked beside Ethan quietly. Not awkward anymore. Comfortable. That scared her too. "You're thinking too loudly," Ethan observed. She glanced sideways. "That's not a real sentence." "It is when your face looks emotionally concerned." Maya smiled, despite herself, then sighed softly. "I'm trying to understand something." "What?" "How you became emotionally smarter than me." Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "I'm definitely not. You notice things now." She looked ahead toward Ava. "Feelings, withdrawal, fear." Her voice lowered. "You pay attention." Pain moved softly through him. "Because losing you forced me to confront parts of myself I avoided my entire life." The honesty hit deeply. Ethan continued quietly. "You leaving destroyed the illusion that success automatically made me good at relationships." Maya swallowed slowly. "Did you hate me after I left?" "No." The answer came instantly. "Not even when you found out about Ava?" He shook his head lightly. "I hated myself more." That hurt her unexpectedly. Because despite everything, Maya never truly wanted Ethan suffering emotionally. She just wanted him awake emotionally. And somehow, now he was. They found Ava eventually near a street musician dancing terribly without shame. Ethan immediately pulled out his phone recording her laughter. Maya watched him carefully. The tenderness in his face looked effortless now. Natural. Like fatherhood had awakened emotional parts of him buried for years. "You're staring again," Ethan murmured without looking away from Ava. "You're different with her." He smiled softly. "She makes honesty easier." Maya understood that. Children often stripped adults down to emotional essentials. No pretending, no performance, no emotional shortcuts. As evening settled over the park, Ava grew sleepy between them while walking back toward the car. Without thinking, she grabbed both their hands simultaneously, one of Ethan's, one of Maya's. The simple gesture stopped both adults emotionally, because suddenly, it felt real. Not temporary, not complicated. Just real. A family. Ava looked up innocently. Why are you both making emotional faces? Ethan coughed lightly. We're cold. You're lying again. Smart child. Dangerously smart. That night, after Ava fell asleep in the car ride home, Ethan carried her carefully upstairs to Maya's apartment. The hallway lights glowed softly while rain tapped outside. After tucking Ava into bed, Ethan lingered near the doorway quietly. Maya stood beside him, close enough now that awareness pulsed constantly between them. She had a good day, Maya whispered. So did I. Their eyes met, stayed. Something shifted slowly in the silence. Not sudden, not impulsive. Earned. Ethan stepped closer carefully, giving her time to move away. Maya didn't. His voice lowered gently. I've wanted to kiss you for weeks. Her pulse stumbled instantly. Ethan. I know. But neither moved back. Years of history sat between them. Pain, growth, regret, love, and beneath all of it, recognition. Maya looked at him with emotions she could no longer fully hide. You hurt me deeply once. I know, and I'm still afraid. Ethan nodded slowly. Then let me earn safety instead of demanding trust. That sentence nearly broke her heart open completely, because finally, he understood the difference between love and emotional responsibility. 3 days later, Ethan kissed Maya for the first time in 7 years. And it happened in the least dramatic way possible. No storm, no grand speech, no cinematic music. Just exhaustion, honesty, and emotional timing. Ava had caught the flu, which meant neither Ethan nor Maya slept properly for almost 40 to 8 hours. The apartment became a haze of medicine schedules, soup, cartoons, forehead kisses, and negotiations, with a stubborn 6-year-old who insisted orange juice was emotionally suspicious. At 2 in the morning, Maya found Ethan asleep sitting upright beside Ava's bed with a children's book hanging loosely from his hand. The sight stopped her quietly, because years ago Ethan would have sent assistants, doctors, nannies, solutions. Now he stayed, fully, presently, without being asked. Maya stood there longer than she meant to, watching him instinctively reach for Ava every time she stirred in her sleep, watching concern crease his face even while exhausted, watching love exist openly in him now instead of buried beneath work and emotional distance. Something inside Maya softened completely then. Not because Ethan became perfect, because he became emotionally available. And maybe that mattered more. A few hours later, Ava finally fell into deeper sleep. Maya walked quietly into the kitchen, rubbing tiredness from her eyes. Ethan followed a minute later. You should sleep, she whispered. So, should you? I asked first. He smiled faintly. God, she loved that smile. The realization no longer shocked her anymore. It simply existed. Heavy, certain, terrifying. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows, while weak yellow light filled the kitchen. Everything felt strangely intimate at this hour. Honest. Ethan leaned against the counter, studying her quietly. What? You stopped looking at me like you're preparing for disaster. Maya laughed softly under her breath. Maybe I'm too tired to maintain emotional defense systems. I'll take it. Silence settled comfortably. Then Ethan spoke more seriously. I meant what I said the other night. Maya's pulse shifted immediately. About loving me correctly. The air changed subtly around them. Maya lowered her eyes briefly. I know. And? She exhaled slowly. And I think part of me kept waiting for you to become this person years ago. Pain flickered across Ethan's face immediately. I know. No. Her voice softened. I don't say that to punish you anymore. She looked up carefully. I think I'm grieving what we could have been if you'd understood emotional presence sooner. That honesty landed deeply, because Ethan grieved it too. All the lost years, all the avoidable loneliness, all the love buried beneath emotional immaturity. He stepped closer, unconsciously. Maya. This time, when he said her name, she didn't pull emotionally away. That mattered. A lot. Ethan's voice lowered gently. I can't change who I was. I know, but I would spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of both of you. The sincerity in his face nearly undid her completely. Not polished, not strategic, real. Maya's eyes glistened faintly. You really changed. I had to. Why? Ethan answered without hesitation. Because losing you forced me to realize success meant nothing if the people I loved felt alone beside me. And suddenly, Maya couldn't maintain distance anymore. Not emotional distance. Not physical. She stepped toward him slowly. Close enough now that warmth passed between them. Years ago, Ethan would have rushed this moment, Old Ethan feared vulnerability enough to cover it quickly. This version simply waited, patient, present, emotionally there. Maya's voice barely existed above a whisper. "I'm still scared." Ethan nodded gently. "Me too." That honesty made the difference. No pretending, no guarantees, just truth. And maybe truth was safer than perfection ever could be. Then Maya touched his face softly. The movement alone nearly shattered Ethan emotionally, because she hadn't touched him like this in years. Not carefully, not lovingly. His eyes closed briefly against her hand, and when he opened them again, Maya kissed him first. Softly, tentatively, like someone reopening a door they once sealed shut to survive. Ethan kissed her back with heartbreaking restraint. Not hungry, not rushed, careful, like he understood exactly how precious trust had become between them. Years of unresolved love moved quietly through that kiss. Regret, healing, recognition, forgiveness. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke immediately. They simply stayed close, breathing, feeling, existing inside a moment both thought they lost forever. Then, ew. Both of them jumped apart instantly. Ava stood halfway down the hallway, holding her blanket dramatically. "You're doing mouth stuff." Maya covered her face immediately. Ethan looked emotionally defeated. Ava narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "I knew you were being weird." Neither adult recovered fast enough. Ava sighed deeply, like a disappointed therapist. "You should have just said you liked each other." Ethan blinked. "You knew? You stare at each other emotionally all the time." Maya nearly collapsed, laughing from embarrassment and exhaustion combined. Ava climbed onto a chair, yawning. "Can I have juice now?" "You're supposed to be asleep," Maya managed weakly. "And you're supposed to be less obvious." That child truly missed nothing. Later, after finally settling Ava back into bed again, Ethan stood near the apartment door, preparing to leave before sunrise. Neither wanted the night to end completely. That much was obvious now. Maya walked him to the hallway quietly. The emotional atmosphere between them had changed entirely. Softer now. Open. Ethan looked at her carefully. "So," Maya smiled faintly. "So, I should probably say something meaningful after our daughter emotionally roasted us. She definitely inherited your confidence. And your terrifying observation skills." Maya laughed softly again. Then Ethan's expression gentled. More serious now. "I don't want to rush you." The sentence alone proved how much he changed. Years ago, Ethan pursued solutions quickly. Efficiency, resolution. Now he understood emotional pacing mattered. Maya stepped closer slowly. "You're not rushing me anymore." Her voice softened. "That's why this feels different." Emotion moved visibly across his face. Not pride. Relief. Then Maya whispered something she hadn't allowed herself to say in years. "I missed you too." And Ethan realized in that moment that healing wasn't loud. Sometimes it arrived quietly. Through consistency, through accountability, through late-night honesty, and through two people finally learning how to love each other without disappearing emotionally inside the relationship. Love felt different the second time. That was the first thing Maya noticed. Years ago, loving Ethan felt exciting but unstable, like trying to hold water in trembling hands. Now it felt quieter, safer, not because fear disappeared completely, because honesty existed where silence used to live. The weeks after their kiss unfolded slowly, carefully, like both of them understood how fragile rebuilt trust could be. Ethan didn't pressure her, didn't overwhelm her with grand gestures, didn't try purchasing forgiveness through luxury or excess. Instead, he did smaller things, consistent things. He showed up, every time. School events, late-night pharmacy runs, art showcases, movie nights, hard conversations, presence. Again and again, it came back to presence. One evening, Maya stood inside the kitchen watching Ethan help Ava study spelling words, or rather, watching him fail dramatically. "Dad," Ava sighed, "you can't spell beautiful differently every time." "I'm exploring creative options. That's not how education works." Maya laughed softly while stirring soup. The apartment glowed warm against cold winter rain outside, and suddenly she realized something terrifying. This no longer felt temporary. It felt like life, real life, messy, tender, shared. That realization brought both comfort and fear, because when happiness became real, loss felt possible again too. Later that night, after Ava fell asleep curled beside crayons and unfinished homework, Maya found Ethan standing quietly near the apartment window, thinking. She recognized that expression immediately. "What's wrong?" Ethan looked over slowly. "My mother asked me something today." Maya stepped beside him. "What?" She asked why I spent so many years believing work mattered more than emotional connection. Pain lingered quietly beneath his words. Maya stayed silent. Ethan rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer her. Because the truth was uncomfortable. He spent most of his life trying to earn worth through achievement. Love felt conditional growing up. Success felt measurable. Emotions didn't. Maya leaned lightly against the window beside him. My mom used to say emotionally neglected people often become emotionally unavailable adults without realizing it. Ethan looked down briefly. That sounds painfully accurate. It's not an excuse. I know. She touched his arm gently. But understanding where damage begins matters if you want to stop repeating it. The warmth of her hand nearly distracted him from the conversation entirely. God, he still wasn't used to this, being loved openly again. Ethan looked at her carefully. You know what scares me most? What? That I almost missed this life completely. Maya's chest tightened softly, because she understood exactly what he meant. If not for one bookstore cafe, one accidental meeting, one stubborn little girl who loved dinosaurs, they might have remained strangers carrying unfinished grief forever. Ethan's voice lowered quietly. I missed Ava's first steps. Maya's expression gentled instantly. Ethan, I missed birthdays, bedtime stories, her first day of school. His eyes lowered painfully. And the worst part is knowing some of that loss came from who I used to be. The guilt still lived inside him deeply. Maya turned fully toward him. You can't punish yourself forever. I know, but you keep trying anyway. He looked at her silently, then admitted softly. I think part of me still believes I don't deserve this. That confession broke her heart a little, because Ethan genuinely meant it. Maya stepped closer carefully. You know what Ava sees when she looks at you? What? A father who shows up. Emotion moved visibly across his face. And you? He asked quietly. Maya held his gaze for a long moment. I see a man who finally learned that emotional presence matters more than perfection. The silence afterward felt intimate in the deepest way, not tension, understanding. Then Ethan kissed her forehead gently. Small gesture, massive meaning. Years ago, their relationship burned fast and emotionally uneven. Now love moved slower, deeper, more intentional, and somehow, that made it stronger. The following weekend, Ethan invited Maya and Ava to his mother's house for dinner, a real family dinner. Not formal, not performative, just family. Maya felt nervous immediately. You've met her before, Ethan reminded gently while driving. That was before I disappeared with your child for 6 years. Fair point. Ethan reached over, quietly squeezing her hand. We disappeared from each other. The correction mattered, because despite everything, Ethan no longer framed the past through blame alone. Growth had taught him shared emotional complexity. When they arrived, Margaret Cole opened the door before they even knocked properly. Ava, the little girl, immediately ran inside laughing. Margaret looked healthier now, though the stroke had softened her physically. Emotion brightened her face seeing them together, especially Ethan and Maya, standing side by side again. During dinner, warmth filled the house naturally. Claire told embarrassing childhood stories. Ava aggressively criticized Ethan's cooking history. Margaret watched everyone with quiet emotion she barely tried hiding. At one point, while Ava and Claire argued about whether penguins had knees, Margaret touched Maya's hand softly. Thank you. Maya looked surprised. For what? For giving my son another chance to become himself. The words hit unexpectedly hard, because maybe that was exactly what happened. Not transformation into someone entirely new, but becoming emotionally honest enough to finally be fully himself. Later that evening, Ethan stood alone briefly on the back porch, watching snow begin falling softly across the yard. Maya joined him quietly. You survived family dinner. Barely. Claire weaponizes childhood stories. She likes you. That's still emotionally concerning. Maya laughed softly. Then silence settled comfortably between them, while snow drifted gently around the porch lights. Peaceful. Ethan looked at her carefully. What are you thinking? Maya answered honestly. That this feels real now. His chest tightened slightly. Does that scare you? Yes. She smiled faintly afterward, but not enough to run anymore. And Ethan realized something then. Love was never supposed to eliminate fear completely. Real love simply made two people willing to stay emotionally present despite it. Spring arrived slowly that year. Rain softened. Trees brightened. The city felt less heavy somehow. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan's life no longer revolved entirely around work. Some mornings began with Ava climbing into bed at 6:30, asking impossible questions about sharks. Some evenings ended with Maya asleep beside him on the couch, while unfinished movies played quietly in the background. Ordinary things. Beautiful things. The kind Ethan once overlooked while chasing larger achievements. Now he understood. A meaningful life was usually built from small moments fully experienced. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes, while Ava sat nearby drawing scientifically inaccurate dragons. Maya entered half awake wearing one of his old sweaters. The sight alone nearly distracted him emotionally. Ava noticed immediately. You're staring again. Ethan pointed the spatula toward her. Children should mind their business. I am your business. Fair. Maya laughed softly before wrapping her arms around Ethan from behind. Simple gesture. Warm. Natural. Home. Years ago, intimacy between them often existed beside emotional distance. Now, even silence felt connected. Maya rested her cheek lightly against his back. You burned breakfast again. I prefer the term emotionally seasoned. Ava groaned dramatically. You both flirt like tired librarians. The kitchen erupted with laughter, and Ethan suddenly froze emotionally for half a second, because this right here, was the life he almost lost forever. Not luxury, not success. This, messy mornings, shared laughter, belonging, presence. Later that afternoon, Ava insisted they all visit the bookstore cafe where Ethan first saw them again months earlier. It's historically important, she explained seriously. Maya nearly laughed into her coffee. The cafe owner recognized them immediately. Well, she smiled warmly toward Ethan. You finally stopped looking emotionally devastated. Maya choked on her drink. Ethan looked personally betrayed. You discussed my sadness publicly? You stared out that window like a divorced poet for weeks. Ava looked delighted. Dad was emotionally pathetic. Apparently, Maya laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes, and Ethan realized something profound in that moment. Joy felt fuller when shared with people emotionally safe enough to witness your imperfections. While Ava searched the children's shelves nearby, Maya and Ethan settled near the same window where everything changed. Rain tapped softly outside again, just like that first night. You know, Maya said quietly, I almost left the cafe before you walked in that evening. Ethan looked over sharply. Why? Because part of me still wasn't ready to face what losing you did to me. The honesty settled gently between them. Ethan reached for her hand instinctively now. Natural. Easy. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what you needed. Maya intertwined her fingers with his, slowly. You understand now? Yes. Not defensive. Not uncertain. Certain. Because Ethan finally learned something years too late, and exactly on time. Love required emotional participation, not just intention. Ava returned suddenly carrying 3 books and immediate chaos. Important question. Ethan sighed playfully. That sentence never ends peacefully. If 2 emotionally damaged people heal together, Ava asked seriously, does that make them emotionally healthy or emotionally suspicious? Silence. Then Maya burst into laughter. Ethan blinked slowly. You are 6. I'm observant. That's honestly becoming alarming. The cafe owner wiped tears laughing nearby. And for a second, Ethan simply sat there, absorbing everything. Maya's laughter, Ava's energy, warm coffee, rain against windows. Life. Real life. Not the lonely version he once mistook for success. That evening, after Ava fell asleep at home surrounded by books she swore she would absolutely finish responsibly, Ethan and Maya sat quietly together on the apartment balcony. City lights glowed softly below them. No music, no television, just honesty and night air. Maya rested against his shoulder while Ethan traced slow circles across her hand. Peace settled between them naturally now, not forced, earned. After a long silence, Maya spoke softly. You know something strange? What? I used to think losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. Maya looked up at him gently. But now I think loving you the first time taught me what emotional loneliness feels like. Her fingers tightened lightly around his. And loving you the second time taught me what emotional safety feels like. Emotion moved visibly through Ethan's face, because no compliment in his entire professional life had ever mattered more than that sentence. He kissed her temple softly. I spent years trying to build an empire, he admitted quietly. Turns out the most meaningful thing I ever built was trust. Maya smiled against his shoulder. Below them, the city continued moving endlessly. People rushing, dreaming, loving badly, loving well, trying again. And somewhere inside that enormous restless world, 3 imperfect people had finally found each other at the right emotional time. Not because life became flawless, but because they learned something most people spend years misunderstanding. Love alone is never enough. Love must be accompanied by presence, by accountability, by listening, by emotional honesty, by the willingness to stay connected even when life becomes difficult. Ethan once believed providing financially made him valuable. Now he understood the truth much more clearly. The people we love rarely remember every gift we buy them, but they always remember whether we were emotionally present when they needed us most. And on quiet nights, when rain tapped softly against apartment windows and Ava slept peacefully down the hall, Ethan sometimes thought back to the man he used to be, the emotionally distant billionaire who believed success could compensate for absence. He barely recognized him anymore, because now, for the first time in his life, He finally understood that the richest people in the world are not the ones who own the most. They are the ones fully present in the lives of the people they love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, do you believe people can truly change emotionally after losing the people they love? Or do you think some damage can never fully be repaired? Because tonight's story reminds us of something many people learn too late. Love is not only about providing, not only about staying physically close, not only about saying, I love you. Real love is presence. It's listening. It's consistency. It's emotional availability. It's showing up fully for the people who trust you with their hearts. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is not finding the perfect person. It's becoming emotionally healthy enough to truly keep them. Thank you for spending this journey with Love Stories by Mr. Johnson. And remember, people may forget expensive gifts, achievements, or status, but they never forget how emotionally safe you made them feel.